The helicopter touched down at 0600 hours, and Margaret Caldwell stepped onto red Georgia clay for the first time in 23 years. She was 54 years old. Her hair had gone silver at the temples, though the rest still held traces of the auburn that her late husband had loved. She moved with an economy of motion that most people mistook for slowness. It wasn't. It was precision. Every step deliberate. Every movement calculated. 20 years in the SEAL teams had taught her that wasted motion got people killed. The base commander, Colonel Frank Morrison, met her on the tarmac. He was a good man. Old school. They'd served together briefly in the early 2000s, back when Margaret was still active and the world was still pretending that women couldn't do what she'd already done 100 times over. "Mags," he said, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming. You said it was important." "It is." Morrison's face was troubled. "Walk with me." They moved away from the helicopter, the rotor wash dying behind them. The Georgia heat was already oppressive, even at this early hour. Margaret felt sweat forming at the small of her back, but she'd operated in worse. Much worse. "What's the situation?" she asked. "Force Recon Selection Exercise. Operation Black Mamba. 96 hours in the Okefenokee Swamp. 4 candidates, all top performers." Morrison paused. "And one problem." "Which is?" "The officer running the exercise. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Stryker." Margaret stopped walking. The name hit her like a physical blow. She kept her face neutral, but Morrison had known her too long. "You recognize the name," he said. "Should I?" He was attached to Naval Special Warfare Command for 2 years, intelligence liaison. He would have crossed paths with your old unit. Margaret remembered. Stryker, ambitious, political, the kind of officer who cared more about his career than his men. She'd never trusted him, and her instincts had kept her alive through 3 decades of impossible operations. "Why is he a problem?" she asked. "I don't know yet. That's why you're here." Morrison handed her a folder. "Something's wrong, Mags. I can feel it. The exercise parameters he's set up, they're dangerous, unnecessarily dangerous, and he specifically requested that the candidates receive no external support or observation. Which made you suspicious. Which made me call you." Margaret opened the folder. 4 personnel files. 4 faces staring up at her. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Brixton, 38 years old. Platoon leader. Combat tours in Afghanistan and Syria. Excellent service record, but psychological evaluation noted difficulty accepting authority from non-traditional sources. Margaret knew what that meant. He didn't like taking orders from women. Corporal Trey Donnelly, 32, hand-to-hand combat instructor. 2 failed attempts at SEAL selection. Buds, washout. The file noted persistent resentment regarding special operations community. Another one with something to prove. Lance Corporal Emmett Cross, 24, designated marksman. Top scores in every shooting qualification. 0 combat experience. Eager, hungry, untested. Sergeant First Class Nolan Webb, 29. Communications specialist, genius level aptitude scores. Noted for irreverent attitude and difficulty with traditional command structure. Smart mouth, probably thought he was the cleverest person in every room. 4 elite Marines. 4 men who would look at Margaret and see a 54-year-old woman with silver hair and assume she was someone's secretary. "When does the exercise begin?" she asked. "Briefing in 1 hour, insertion at 1800. "And my cover? Civilian contractor, subject matter expert on swamp operations. You're here to observe and advise." Morrison met her eyes. "Officially, and unofficially, find out what Stryker is planning. Protect those men if necessary." He paused. "I know I'm asking a lot. You're retired. You've earned your peace." Margaret thought about her husband, Michael, buried at Arlington since 2003. She thought about their daughter Sarah, now a Navy helicopter pilot, carrying on the family tradition. She thought about 20 years of service, 20 years of sacrifice, 20 years of being told she couldn't do what she'd already done. "I'll handle it," she said. The briefing room was exactly what Margaret expected. Utilitarian, functional, dominated by a large topographical map of the Okefenokee Swamp spread across a central table. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Stryker stood at the head of the table. He was tall, lean, with the kind of ramrod posture that came from too much time in front of mirrors. His uniform was immaculate. His silver eagles gleamed. But Margaret noticed the things others missed, the slight tremor in his left hand, the way his eyes never quite settled the thin sheen of sweat on his upper lip that had nothing to do with the heat. He was nervous, hiding something. The four Marines stood at attention behind him. They hadn't noticed Margaret enter. She'd moved to the corner of the room, positioned herself in shadow. Old habits. "Gentlemen," Stryker said, "Operation Black Mamba is the most demanding exercise in force recon selection. 96 hours, 0 external support, full combat loadout." He traced a route on the map with his finger. Margaret's eyes followed, and within seconds she'd identified 3 critical flaws in his planning. The route passed through a known flash flood gully. It crossed directly through cottonmouth breeding territory during peak mating season. And the extraction point was built on what looked like solid ground but was actually a peat bog that would swallow a helicopter whole. Either Stryker was incompetent or he was trying to get these men killed. Margaret didn't believe in coincidences. "Your mission is simple," Stryker continued. "Navigate to the extraction point, evade the opposition force hunter teams, survive." He looked at each Marine in turn. "This is where legends are made, gentlemen. Don't disappoint me." Gunnery Sergeant Brixton spoke first. "Sir, the route looks aggressive. Any particular reason we're pushing through the southern corridor?" "Questioning my tactical planning, Gunny." "No, sir. Just seeking clarification. The route is designed to test your limits. If you can't handle it, there's the door." Brixton's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Smart enough to know when to shut up. Dumb enough to accept an answer that wasn't an answer. Margaret decided it was time to make her presence known. She stepped out of the shadow, moving toward the table with that deliberate stride that had carried her through 100 combat zones. The movement caught Stryker's attention first. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. He knew who she was. Margaret was certain of it now. "Colonel Stryker," she said, keeping her voice level. "I'm Margaret Caldwell. Naval Special Warfare Command sent me as a subject matter expert on swamp operations." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Stryker's face went through a rapid series of transformations: surprise, recognition, anger, and finally a carefully constructed mask of contempt. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, emphasizing the title. "I wasn't informed of any additional personnel. It was a last-minute assignment. I have extensive experience in this type of terrain." "I'm sure you do." His voice dripped with condescension. "And what exactly does a civilian contractor bring to a Marine Corps exercise?" Margaret didn't take the bait. She walked to the table and looked down at the map. Let her finger trace the route he'd marked. "This path takes them through Snakebite Hollow," she said quietly. "Flash flood risk is extreme with the weather patterns coming in. Here," she tapped a specific point, "you're routing them directly through a cottonmouth breeding ground. Peak aggression season, and your extraction point." She shook her head. "Satellite imagery shows solid ground, but I've operated in this area. That's a peat bog. You put a helicopter down there, it'll sink to its axles in 90 seconds. The silence was absolute. The four Marines were staring at her now. Brixton's expression had shifted from dismissal to reluctant interest. Donnelly's face was harder to read: suspicion maybe, or the particular resentment of a man who'd failed, where this woman had apparently succeeded. Cross. The young sniper looked confused. Webb, the smart-mouthed comms specialist, was actually smirking. Stryker's mask cracked, just for a moment. Margaret saw the fury underneath the calculation, the fear. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, and now his voice was ice. "I've been planning operations since before you were graduating from Buds." Margaret interrupted. She kept her voice pleasant, conversational. "Class 298. First integrated training cycle. I was 22 years old." The room went completely still. Brixton's eyes widened. Donnelly actually took a step back as if he'd been struck. Cross looked like someone had just told him gravity worked in reverse. Webb stopped smirking. "That's impossible," Donnelly said. His voice was rough-aggressive. "Women weren't allowed in the SEAL teams, not until the official program started in 2016, Margaret agreed. But there were experiments, classified operations, deniable assets. She met his eyes. "I exist whether you believe in me or not, Corporal. This is absurd." Stryker's voice had gone sharp-cutting. "I don't know what game naval special warfare is playing, but I will not have my exercise compromised by some publicity stunt." "It's not a publicity stunt, Colonel. It's an observation mission. I'm here to watch, advise, and report. Nothing more. You're not going into that swamp with my Marines." "Actually, I am." Margaret pulled a folded document from her pocket and handed it to him. "Orders from MARSOC Command, signed by General Harrison himself. I'm attached to this exercise as an observer. My participation is non-negotiable." Stryker read the orders. His face went pale, then flushed red. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Brixton laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, ugly with contempt. "You've got to be kidding me. We're taking a grandmother into the Okefenokee." Gunny Stryker started, but Brixton wasn't finished. "With all due respect, ma'am, this is Force Recon Selection, the most demanding training the Marine Corps offers. We're talking 96 hours of pure hell, gators, snakes, hostiles. And you expect us to nursemaid some retired—" "I don't expect anything," Margaret said. Her voice hadn't changed, still calm, still level. "Except for you to complete your mission. I'll observe, I'll stay out of your way. And if you're as good as your files suggest, Gunnery Sergeant, you won't even notice I'm there. And if things go wrong, things always go wrong. That's what separates operators from everyone else, how you respond when the plan falls apart." Brixton stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not respect, not yet, but perhaps the first crack in his certainty. "Fine," he said finally, "but you stay in the rear. You don't give orders, you don't interfere. And if you can't keep up, we're not slowing down." "I wouldn't dream of it." The helicopters lifted off at exactly 1800 hours, just as the sun began its descent toward the tree line. Two UH-60 Blackhawks running without lights, heading deep into the Okefenokee. Margaret sat in the rear of the lead bird, her back against the bulkhead, her eyes closed. She wasn't sleeping. She was listening, processing, preparing. Around her, the 4 Marines were doing final equipment checks. Brixton was reviewing the map one more time, his lips moving slightly as he memorized landmarks. Donnelly was checking his knife for the 100th time, a KA bar standard issue, but worn in a way that suggested he'd used it for more than opening MREs. Cross was cradling his rifle like a security blanket, his young face taut with nervous energy. Webb was tapping away at his communications equipment, running diagnostic after diagnostic. None of them were paying attention to her. That was fine. That was exactly what she wanted. Margaret let her mind drift back to the briefing to Stryker's face when he'd read those orders. He'd recognized her name. She was certain of it now, which meant he knew something about her past. Something that frightened him, or something that threatened him. The helicopter banked, and through the open door, Margaret caught a glimpse of the swamp below. Miles and miles of dark water and darker shadows stretching to the horizon in every direction. The Okefenokee. Native American name meaning land of the trembling earth. 250,000 acres of wetland home to 12,000 alligators, countless venomous snakes, and 100 ways to die if you didn't know what you were doing. Margaret knew what she was doing. She'd operated in worse. 5 minutes to insertion, the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. The Marines began gathering their gear. Margaret did the same, moving with an efficiency that caught Webb's attention. He was watching her now, she noticed, studying her movements, trying to figure her out. Let him look. Let them all look. They'd understand soon enough. 2 minutes. Brixton was on his feet now, running through the final checklist. Comms check. Everyone on Channel 7. Radio silence unless absolutely necessary. Donnelly, you've got point. Cross rear security. Webb, stay close to me, and Mrs. Caldwell. He paused, and the contempt was back in his voice. Try not to fall behind. I'll do my best, Gunny. 1 minute. The helicopter descended. Treetops rushed past the open door. Margaret felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the surge of adrenaline that preceded every insertion. 20 years since her last combat jump. But some things never changed. 30 seconds. The Black Hawk flared its nose, coming up its descent slowing. Through the door, Margaret could see the landing zone, a small clearing surrounded by cypress trees, barely large enough for the helicopter's rotor wash. Go, go, go! Donnelly was out first, hitting the ground in a combat roll and coming up with his weapon ready. Cross followed, then Webb, then Brixton. Margaret went last, dropping from the helicopter with a practiced ease that made Webb look twice. The Black Hawk lifted off immediately, its rotors tearing at the humid air, its bulk disappearing into the darkening sky. Within seconds, the sound of its engines faded to nothing. They were alone. The swamp closed around them like a living thing. The air was thick and wet, heavy with the smell of decay and growing things. Insects buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, an alligator bellowed a deep rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Brixton gestured for everyone to move. Single file, weapons ready, standard patrol formation. They moved. Margaret took her place at the rear of the column behind Cross. She walked carefully, placing each foot with deliberate precision, avoiding the soft mud that would suck at her boots and leave tracks. The Marines ahead of her weren't as careful. They were making too much noise, leaving too many signs. But she said nothing. Not yet. They traveled for 2 hours before Brixton called the first halt. A small island of relatively solid ground surrounded by black water. He gathered everyone together, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his GPS unit. We're on schedule, he said quietly. 12 clicks to the first waypoint. We'll rest here for 30 minutes, then push through the night. Sir, Cross said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm picking up something weird on the motion sensors. Might be nothing but... What kind of something? Multiple contacts, moving parallel to our route, about 800 meters out. Brixton frowned. Op-4 hunter teams. They're probably trying to get ahead of us, set up an ambush. He looked around the group. We're changing route, cut north around the sensor net. That takes us through the cottonmouth breeding ground, Margaret said. Everyone turned to look at her. Brixton's face hardened. I'm aware of the terrain, Mrs. Caldwell. Then you're aware that cottonmouths are most aggressive at night, especially during mating season. We'd be walking into a kill zone. It's a calculated risk. It's an unnecessary risk. The eastern route adds 2 hours, but it keeps us clear of both the sensor net and the snake territory. 2 hours we don't have. 2 hours you can't afford to lose if someone gets bitten. Margaret kept her voice reasonable, professional. Antivenin is 30 clicks away. A cottonmouth bite won't kill you fast, but it'll incapacitate you within an hour. You'll be carrying dead weight through hostile terrain with no extraction support. Brixton stared at her. The other Marines watched the exchange with varying degrees of interest. Webb looked almost amused. Donnelly's face was unreadable. Cross just looked scared. I'm not changing the route, Brixton said finally. That's your call, Gunny. I'm just offering my expertise. Your expertise is noted and overruled. Margaret nodded once. Understood. They moved out 10 minutes later, heading north, toward the cottonmouths, toward trouble. Margaret didn't argue further. There was no point. Brixton had to learn his own lessons. She just hoped those lessons wouldn't cost someone their life. The snake came out of nowhere. One moment Donnelly was pushing through a stand of cattails. The next he was screaming, stumbling backward, his hand going to his thigh where the cottonmouth had struck. Contact snake, Donnelly's hit. The night erupted into chaos. Cross spun around looking for a target he couldn't shoot. Webb fumbled with his medical kit. Brixton was shouting orders that nobody could hear over Donnelly's screaming. Margaret moved. She was at Donnelly's side before anyone else could react. Her hands were steady as she pulled the knife from her boot and cut away the fabric around the bite. 2 puncture wounds already swelling, blood mixing with venom. Hold still, she commanded. Get off me, I said, hold still, Corporal. You want to live or you want to die? Donnelly went quiet. His eyes were wide wild with pain and fear, but he stopped struggling. Margaret worked quickly. She used a compression bandage to immobilize his leg above the bite, slowing the spread of venom. She injected him with a dose of antihistamine from her own kit. She talked him through it, her voice low and steady, cutting through his panic. Breathe. Slow breaths. The venom is going to hurt, but you're not going to die. Not if you stay calm and listen to me. How do you know? Because I've been bitten 3 times and I'm still here. She finished wrapping the bandage and looked up at Brixton, who was standing over them with a look of stunned disbelief. We need to move him to higher ground. The venom's going to cause swelling, possible necrosis. He can still walk, but not for long. Brixton's face was ashen. The cottonmouths. You said... I know what I said, Gunny. It doesn't matter now. What matters is getting him somewhere safe and calling for evac. We can't call for evac. The exercise... Forget the exercise. Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. This man needs medical attention. Real medical attention. Not field treatment in the middle of a swamp. For a long moment, Brixton didn't move. Margaret watched him struggle with it, the pride, the stubbornness, the desperate need to prove himself. Then Webb spoke up. Gunny, she's right. Donnelly's in bad shape. If we don't get him out of here... I know. Brixton's voice was barely above a whisper. I know. He looked at Margaret, and for the first time she saw something other than contempt in his eyes. Shame. Uncertainty. The first cracks in his armor. What do? We improvise, Margaret said. Cross, find me 2 straight branches about 6 feet long. Webb, get on the radio. See if you can raise anyone on the emergency frequency. Brixton, help me move Donnelly to that clearing. They moved. It took 15 minutes to rig a makeshift stretcher using branches and ponchos. Donnelly was conscious, but fading, his face pale and slick with sweat. The venom was working through his system, and there was only so much field treatment could do. Webb was on the radio, his voice low and urgent. Sierra Base, this is Mamba 2-4. We have a medical emergency, requesting immediate evac at coordinates. He read off their position. Static crackled back. No response. Try again, Brixton said. Webb tried again, and again, and again. Nothing. The swamp's too thick, he said finally. We're too deep in. Radio can't punch through. Then we carry him out. Brixton's voice was firm, decisive. The shock was wearing off, replaced by determination. We move fast, we move quiet, we get to higher ground where we can get a signal. That's 12 clicks through hostile terrain, Cross pointed out. With UP4 teams hunting us, and we're down a man. Then we move faster. Margaret shook her head. Wait, something's wrong. What do you mean? She was staring at Webb's radio, her mind racing. You said Sierra Base. That's the exercise command frequency, the one Stryker gave you. Yeah, so why isn't there even a carrier signal? Even if they can't hear you, you should be picking up their broadcast. The command post should be transmitting continuously. Webb checked his equipment. His face went pale. She's right. There's nothing. It's like they're not even out there. That's impossible, Brixton said. Stryker's running this exercise from Sierra Base. He's got a full staff communications equipment emergency support. Unless he doesn't want to be found. Margaret's voice was quiet, but it cut through the night like a blade. Unless this whole exercise was designed to put you somewhere no one could reach you. The words hung in the humid air. Brixton stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying someone wanted you out here, alone, unreachable. Margaret met his eyes. I'm saying this isn't an exercise anymore. Before anyone could respond, Cross spoke up. Movement 800 meters and closing. They all went still, listening. At first, there was nothing but the normal sounds of the swamp insects, frogs, the distant bellow of gators. Then Margaret heard it. Footsteps. Not the careful, measured tread of Marines trying to stay quiet. These were hurried, organized, moving with purpose. That's not OP4, she said. How do you know? Because O4 doesn't carry automatic weapons. The first shots shattered the night. That muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets tore through the air, thudding into trees, splashing into water. The Marines scattered, taking cover wherever they could find it. Margaret grabbed Donnelly's stretcher and dragged him behind a fallen cypress log. His eyes were glazed, barely conscious, but he was still breathing. "Cross-return fire, Webb. Get that radio working, Brixton." But Brixton was already moving. He'd grabbed his rifle and was laying down, suppressing fire, giving the others time to reposition. Contact left 2 shooters. "I see them." Cross's rifle cracked twice. One of the muzzle flashes went dark. "Good shot. Keep them pinned." Margaret assessed the situation with the cold clarity of someone who'd been in dozens of firefights. 6, maybe 8 hostiles, automatic weapons, coordinated movement. These weren't training OPFOR, these were professionals, and they were trying to kill them. "Webb, any luck on that radio? I'm getting interference. Someone's jamming us." Jamming. That confirmed it. This wasn't random. Someone had planned this. A bullet whipped past Margaret's head close enough to feel the heat. She flattened herself against the log, her mind racing through options. They were outgunned, outmanned. One of their number was injured and incapable of fighting. Their communications were compromised, and they had no idea who was attacking them or why. Standard SEAL protocol. When you can't win a straight fight, change the rules. "Fall back," she shouted. "Deeper into the swamp. They can't use their numbers if we get into thick terrain." "Are you crazy?" Brixton yelled back. "We'll be sitting ducks." "We're sitting ducks now. At least in the thick we can use the environment." Another burst of gunfire. Cross cried out, clutching his arm. Not a killing shot, but he was hurt. "Cross is down." Margaret made a decision. She'd been observing long enough. Time to act. She rose from behind the log and sprinted across the open ground. Bullets kicked up mud around her feet. She dove, rolled, came up running. 30 yards. 20. 10. The shooter saw her coming, tried to adjust his aim. Too slow. Margaret hit him low and hard, driving her shoulder into his midsection. They went down together in a tangle of limbs. He was bigger than her, stronger, probably 20 years younger. It didn't matter. 3 moves. Her hand found his throat. Her knee found his groin. Her elbow found his temple. He went limp. She stripped his weapon, an M4 with a suppressor, definitely not standard issue, and took his radio. The frequency was already set to something she didn't recognize. But the voices coming through were speaking Spanish. Spanish. Her blood went cold. She knew that dialect. Northern Mexico, cartel territory. And suddenly, pieces started falling into place. Stryker's nervousness. The deliberately flawed route. The communications blackout. The professional killers in the swamp. This wasn't an exercise gone wrong. This was an execution. Margaret keyed the dead man's radio. "This is Nightshade," she said in flawless Spanish. "Tell your boss he missed." A pause. Then a voice came back, smooth and cold. "The widow. I was wondering when you'd announce yourself." Margaret's heart stopped. She knew that voice. She'd heard it once before, 10 years ago, in a concrete room in Tijuana, where she'd watched a cartel lieutenant die by her hand. His brother, Alejandro Reyes. "You should have stayed dead," she said. "I could say the same to you, ghost. But don't worry. By morning you will be. You and everyone with you." The radio went dead. Margaret looked back at the Marines. Brixton was dragging the wounded Cross to cover. Webb was frantically working on his equipment. Donnelly was barely conscious on his stretcher. 4 men, 2 injured. Surrounded by cartel killers in the middle of a swamp, with a traitor controlling their only link to the outside world. She'd been in worse situations. She couldn't remember when, but she must have been. "Fall back to the tree line," she called out. "We're moving. Now." Brixton's face was a mask of confusion and fear. "Who the hell was that? What's going on?" "I'll explain when we're not being shot at. Move." They moved. The swamp swallowed them whole, and somewhere in the darkness behind them, 20 men followed. Hunting. Waiting. The widow had returned. and by morning only one side would walk out of the Okefenokee alive. They ran. Margaret led them deeper into the swamp, away from the gunfire, away from the bodies, away from everything that made sense. The wounded Cross stumbled beside Webb, one arm useless, the other gripping his rifle like a lifeline. Brixton and Margaret carried Donnelly's stretcher between them, the unconscious Marine's weight slowing them down with every step. Behind them, the hunters followed. "How much farther?" Brixton gasped. "Until I say stop." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." They pushed through a wall of cattails and into a shallow channel. Water rose to their knees, then their waists. Something large slithered past Margaret's leg. She didn't look down. Looking down was how people died out here. "Contact rear," Webb hissed. "Flashlights, maybe 300 meters. Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." Cross stumbled, went down on one knee. Webb grabbed him before he could fall face first into the black water. "I can't. My arm." "You can and you will," Margaret said. Her voice was hard, unforgiving. "Pain is temporary. Dead is forever. Move." Cross moved. They traveled for another 20 minutes before Margaret found what she was looking for. A small island of solid ground elevated just enough to give them a defensive position, surrounded by water, deep enough to slow any approach. "Here. We rest here." Brixton set down his end of the stretcher and immediately took a knee, his chest heaving. Somebody better start explaining what the hell is going on. Margaret checked Donnelly's pulse. Weak, but steady. The antihistamine was helping, but he needed real medical attention soon. She turned to face the three conscious Marines. The short version: "Someone wants me dead, and you're collateral damage." "Who wants you dead?" "A man named Alejandro Reyes, Mexican cartel. His brother was a target on an operation I ran 10 years ago." "You killed his brother." "I completed my mission. His brother was part of that mission." Brixton stared at her. "And this Reyes, he tracked you here to a Marine training exercise in the middle of Georgia. He didn't track me. He set a trap." Margaret's voice was flat, clinical. "Stryker, your commanding officer, he's compromised." "That's insane. Stryker is a traitor." Margaret cut him off. "He owes gambling debts. Millions. Reyes bought those debts. Bought him. This whole exercise was designed to put you in the middle of nowhere with no support and no extraction. Then Reyes sends his men in to finish the job." Webb shook his head. "Why go through all this? If they wanted you dead, there are easier ways." "Because Reyes doesn't just want me dead. He wants me to suffer. He wants me to watch people die because of me." Margaret met each of their eyes in turn. "He's been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment, and Stryker handed it to him." Silence fell over the group. The swamp sounds seemed louder now, more ominous. Cross spoke first. His voice was shaky, but he was trying to hold it together. "So what do? We survive. We get to higher ground where we can signal for help, and we take down anyone who tries to stop us." "There's 20 of them," Brixton said. "Maybe more. We've got 4 people capable of fighting, and 2 of us are wounded. I've faced worse odds." "When?" Margaret smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "That's classified." They rested for exactly 15 minutes. Margaret used the time to redistribute ammunition check wounds and plan their next move. Cross's arm was bad but manageable. The bullet had gone clean through the muscle-missing bone and major blood vessels. Margaret cleaned it, packed it, wrapped it tight. He'd lost some mobility, but he could still shoot. Donnelly was the real problem. The venom was still working through his system. His leg had swollen to twice its normal size, and angry red streaks were spreading up toward his hip. He was running a fever now, muttering in his sleep. "He needs a hospital," Webb said quietly. "He needs to stay alive long enough to reach one." "Can he?" Margaret didn't answer. Some questions didn't have good answers. Brixton approached her while the others were preparing to move. His face was hard to read in the darkness, but his voice carried something new, something that might have been respect. "That thing you did back there, Taking down that shooter, I've seen hand-to-hand specialists who couldn't have done it that clean. I've had practice. How much practice? 20 years, 6 continents, more operations than I can count. She met his eyes. I'm not what you thought I was, Gunny. No, you're not. He paused. I owe you an apology. Save it. Apologize when we're out of here. If we get out of here. We will. Margaret's voice carried absolute certainty. I've never lost a man on an operation. I'm not starting tonight. Brixton studied her for a long moment. Your husband, the one you mentioned, he was a SEAL too. Senior Chief Michael Caldwell. He died in Iraq in 2003. Ambush outside Fallujah. I'm sorry. Don't be. He died doing what he loved, protecting people who needed protecting. She looked out at the dark water. That's all any of us can ask for. Before Brixton could respond, Webb's voice cut through the night. Movement. East. Multiple contacts. Margaret was on her feet instantly. How many? 6, maybe 8. They're trying to flank us. They found our trail. She grabbed her rifle. Time to move. Now. They moved. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in evasion. Margaret led them through terrain that seemed impassable, through water that rose to their chests, through tangles of roots that grabbed at their ankles like skeletal fingers, through darkness so complete that they had to navigate by sound and instinct alone. The cartel hunters followed, but they couldn't keep up. They were good, but they weren't trained for this. They were killers, not survivors. The swamp was eating them alive. Margaret heard them dying. A scream cut short. A splash followed by thrashing. The distinctive bellow of an alligator defending its territory. The swamp was doing her work for her, but not fast enough. We need to stop, Cross said. His voice was barely above a whisper, his face pale with blood loss. I can't keep going. You can. I can't. My legs won't. He collapsed. Margaret caught him before he hit the water, but his weight nearly took her down too. Brixton was there in an instant, grabbing Cross's other arm. He's done, Brixton said. He's not done. He's resting. Margaret looked around. They were in the middle of a flooded forest, standing in waist-deep water, surrounded by cypress trees that rose like columns in a drowned cathedral. There. That tree. Roots above the waterline. We can hold there. They carried Cross to the tree and propped him against the exposed roots. Webb followed with Donnelly's stretcher, struggling to keep the unconscious Marine's head above water. This is bad, Webb said. This is really, really bad. Worse than bad. Brixton was checking their ammunition. I'm down to 2 magazines. Cross is unconscious. Donnelly hasn't woken up in over an hour. And we've got God knows how many hostiles hunting us through a swamp we don't know. I know it. Everyone turned to look at Margaret. I know this swamp, she said. I operated here in 1998. Classified mission. Drug interdiction. She pointed north. 3 clicks that direction, there's an old phosphate mine. Abandoned since the 80s. High ground defensible position, and there's an emergency radio cache that was never recovered. You remember where it is from 26 years ago? I remember everything from every operation. It's how I stay alive. Brixton shook his head. Even if you're right, we can't move 3 clicks with 2 wounded. We'd be sitting ducks. Then we split up. The words hung in the air. No, Brixton said immediately. Absolutely not. We stay together. If we stay together, we all die. Margaret's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. The cartel wants me. They're tracking me. If I move separately, draw them away, you can get the wounded to the mine, get that radio working, call for extraction. That's suicide. That's tactics. She smiled slightly. Besides, I've been doing this a lot longer than you. I know how to disappear. There's 20 of them. There were 20 of them. The swamp's taken at least 4, and I'll take more before I'm done. Webb stepped forward. Ma'am, with all due respect, this is crazy. You can't take on a cartel hit squad by yourself. Watch me. She started checking her weapons. Rifle, pistol, knife. the radio she'd taken from the dead mercenary. She still had access to their communications. When you reach the mine, look for a metal box buried under the northeast corner of the main building. The radio's in there. Frequency 142.7. Call sign Sierra Echo Alpha Lima. Say those words, someone will answer. Someone who? Friends. Margaret finished her preparations and looked at the 4 Marines. 3, conscious, 1 not. All of them staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. But crazy had kept her alive this long. Brixton, get them to the mine. Keep them alive. And if you don't make it, then tell the story. Tell them the widow came back one last time. She turned to go. Wait. Brixton's voice stopped her. Why are you doing this? You don't owe us anything. You could have let us die back there, disappeared into the swamp. They want you, not us. Why risk your life for people who treated you like dirt? Margaret turned back. Her eyes found his in the darkness. Because my husband died, protecting people who needed protecting. Because my daughter serves on a carrier right now, flying helicopters into danger every day. Because that's what we do. SEALs don't leave people behind. Not ever. She paused. And because you're not dirt gunnery sergeant. You're Marines. You just forgot what that means for a little while. She disappeared into the darkness before he could respond. Margaret moved through the swamp like a ghost. 20 years of training, hundreds of operations, thousands of hours learning to be invisible, to strike without warning, to vanish before anyone knew she was there. All of it came back now, muscle memory taking over her body, remembering what her conscious mind had tried to forget. She was the widow, the ghost, Nightshade. And tonight, the hunters were going to learn what it meant to be prey. She found the first one within 20 minutes. He was young, maybe mid-20s, moving through the shallows with an assault rifle and night vision goggles. Good equipment, poor technique. He was watching ahead, not around. Classic mistake. Margaret rose from the water behind him like something out of a nightmare. Her hand covered his mouth before he could scream. Her knife found the gap in his body armor. He was dead before he knew he was dying. She lowered him into the water, took his night vision goggles, his ammunition, his radio. 1 down. She keyed the radio. This is the widow, she said in Spanish. One of your men just died. Who wants to be next? Static. Then Reyes's voice, cold and amused. You think you can frighten my men, Ghost? I think I just did. They're professionals. They've killed dozens of people. So have I. Margaret started moving again, circling around toward where she'd heard more movement. The difference is I'm better at it. We'll see. The radio went dead. Margaret smiled in the darkness. Good. Let them be scared. Let them jump at shadows. Fear was a weapon, and she knew how to use it. She found the second and third hunters together, moving through a channel with their weapons raised. They were scanning the water, looking for threats. They didn't think to look up. Margaret dropped from a cypress branch onto the first one's shoulders. His neck snapped before he could make a sound. The second one spun, tried to bring his weapon around, but Margaret was already moving. She caught his rifle, redirected it, drove her palm into his throat. He went down choking. She finished him quickly. Mercifully. She wasn't a torturer. 3 down. The radio crackled again. 2 teams report. Team 2 report. Silence. Team 3 report. More silence. Margaret keyed her radio. They can't come to the phone right now. This time there was fear in Reyes's voice. Just a trace, but she heard it. You're one woman. You can't kill all of us. Maybe not, but I can kill enough to make you regret ever hearing my name. She kept moving. An hour passed, then 2. Margaret took down 2 more hunters in that time. One with her knife, one with her bare hands. The swamp was littered with bodies now, and the remaining cartel soldiers were starting to panic. She could hear it in their radio chatter, the way they jumped at every sound, the way they clustered together instead of spreading out. Fear was contagious, and she was an epidemic. But she was also getting tired. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, replaced by the bone-deep exhaustion of a 54-year-old body that had been pushed past its limits. Her movements were slower now, her reactions just a fraction delayed. She was running out of time. The radio crackled. Reyes's voice again, but different now. Triumphant. "Widow, I have something you want to hear." A pause. Then a new voice came through. Young, scared, familiar. Ma'am, they got us. They found the mine before we could..." The transmission cut off. Margaret's blood turned to ice. Brixton. They'd found Brixton and the others. "Come to me, Ghost," Reyes said. "The phosphate mine. You have 1 hour. Come alone, come unarmed, or I start killing your Marines. 1 every 15 minutes until you show yourself." "How do I know they're still alive?" Another voice. Webb this time. "We're alive. Cross is conscious. Donnelly's not good, but he's breathing. Ma'am, don't." The transmission cut off again. 1 hour, Reyes repeated. "The clock starts now." Margaret stood in the darkness, surrounded by the bodies of men she'd killed, and made a decision. She started moving toward the mine. The phosphate mine looked different than she remembered. 26 years had not been kind to it. The main building had partially collapsed, its roof sagging like a broken spine. The secondary structures were little more than shells. But the bones were still there, and Margaret could see the defensive advantages she'd identified all those years ago. She could also see the trap. Cartel soldiers surrounded the perimeter, at least 10, maybe more. They had the high ground, the cover, the numbers. And inside the main building she could see movement, shadows. Her Marines held hostage by a man who wanted her dead. Going in there was suicide. Margaret checked her watch. 45 minutes left. She could run, disappear into the swamp, let Reyes kill the Marines, and spend the rest of her life knowing she'd abandoned them. No, that wasn't who she was. That had never been who she was. Michael wouldn't have run. Sarah wouldn't have run. She wasn't going to run. Margaret keyed her radio one final time. "Reyes, widow, you're early. I'm coming in, but I have conditions. You're not in a position to negotiate. I'm always in a position to negotiate." She kept her voice steady, confident. "You want me dead? Fine. I'll walk in there unarmed, and you can do whatever you want to me. But you let the Marines go first." Silence. "They're not part of this," Margaret continued. "They don't know anything. They're just soldiers following orders. Let them go, and you can have your revenge." More silence. Then Reyes laughed. "You would trade your life for men who called you a grandmother, who mocked you, who treated you like dirt?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because that's what SEALs do." Another long pause. When Reyes spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "You know, my brother told me about you once. He said you were different from the other Americans, more dangerous, more principled." He paused. I didn't believe him. I thought he was making excuses for his failure. "Your brother made his choices, so did you." "Yes, we did." Reyes's voice hardened. "Come in, unarmed, hands visible. Any tricks, any weapons, any attempt to resist, and I kill them all, starting with the young one." "Understood." Margaret dropped her rifle, her pistol, her knife, everything that could be considered a weapon. Then she started walking toward the mine. The darkness swallowed her whole, and somewhere ahead, 20 men waited to kill her. She'd been in worse situations. She still couldn't remember when. Margaret walked into the mine with her hands raised and her heart steady. 2 cartel soldiers met her at the entrance. They searched her roughly, professionally, finding nothing. She'd left everything behind, every weapon, every advantage, almost everything. "Move," one of them said, shoving her forward. She moved. The main building was larger than it looked from outside. The ceiling rose 30 feet overhead, supported by rusted steel beams. Industrial equipment lay scattered across the floor, abandoned decades ago and slowly being consumed by the swamp. And in the center of the room, surrounded by armed men, were her Marines. Brixton was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. His face was bloody, one eye swelling shut. He'd fought. Of course he'd fought. Webb knelt beside him, similarly restrained, his smart mouth finally silenced by the gravity of their situation. Cross sat slumped against a support beam, barely conscious, his wounded arm hanging limp. And Donnelly was lying on a stretcher, unmoving. His skin had gone gray. His breathing was shallow, rattling. He was dying. The widow arrives. The voice came from the shadows. Alejandro Reyes stepped into the light, and Margaret saw him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-40s, handsome in a cruel way with high cheekbones and cold, dark eyes. He wore tactical clothing that probably cost more than most people made in a month. A gold cross hung around his neck, glinting in the dim light. Religious iconography on a man who killed for money. Margaret had seen that contradiction before. "You look older than your photographs," Reyes said. "Photographs lie. People don't." "No, they don't." He circled her slowly, studying her like a specimen. "You killed 7 of my men tonight. 7. By yourself. In the dark. Without any support." He stopped in front of her. "My brother was right about you. Your brother was a drug trafficker who got people killed. He deserved what happened to him." Reyes's hand moved so fast she barely saw it. The slap snapped her head to the side, the impact ringing through her skull. "You don't speak about my brother." Margaret turned back to face him, tasted blood, spatted on the ground between them. "I speak about whoever I want." Reyes smiled. It was an ugly expression. "You know what I'm going to do to you, widow. I'm going to make you watch. Every one of these Marines, I'm going to kill them slowly, one at a time, and you're going to watch every second. Then when they're all dead, when you've seen everything you tried to protect destroyed, then I'll let you die. Big talk. You doubt me. I've heard a lot of big talk from a lot of small men. You're not special." Another slap, harder this time. Margaret's vision went white for a moment. "Bring the young one," Reyes said. 2 soldiers grabbed Cross, dragged him forward. The young Marine was barely conscious, his wounded arm leaving a trail of blood on the concrete floor. They threw him at Reyes's feet. Reyes pulled a knife from his belt. Long blade, serrated edge, designed for pain. "This one first," he said. "The boy. He looks like he has a mother somewhere, maybe a sweetheart. They'll never know what happened to him." "Wait," Margaret's voice was steady. "You want revenge for your brother? Fine, take it, but do it properly." Reyes paused. "What do you mean? You want to hurt me, really hurt me?" She met his eyes. "Give me a chance to fight. One-on-one, no weapons, just hands. You win, you kill me however you want. I win, you let the Marines go." Reyes laughed. "You're 54 years old. I'm in my prime. You think you can beat me in a fight? I think you're too scared to find out." The laughter stopped. "I'm not scared of anything." "Then prove it." Silence fell over the room. The cartel soldiers exchanged glances. Brixton was staring at Margaret with something that might have been hope or might have been horror. Reyes considered. His ego was warring with his caution. Margaret could see it in his face. Ego won. It almost always did with men like him. "Fine," he said. "Cut her hands free." One of the soldiers moved forward with a knife. "And when I beat you," Reyes continued, "I'll kill you with my bare hands. No knife, no gun, just these." He held up his fists. "It will be more personal. Whatever helps you sleep at night." Her hands came free. She rubbed her wrists, getting the circulation back. Reyes removed his jacket, handed it to one of his men. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He was a fighter. She could see it in the way he held himself. "Any last words, widow?" Margaret settled into a stance that looked casual but wasn't. "Just one. You should have taken the deal." Reyes attacked. He was fast. Faster than she'd expected. His first punch came at her head like a hammer, all power designed to end the fight in one blow. Margaret wasn't there. She slipped left, let his fist whistle past her ear, and drove her elbow into his exposed ribs. He grunted, stumbled, recovered. His eyes went wide. "You're quick for an old woman. You're slow for someone in his prime." He came again. Combination this time. Jab, cross hook, Textbook boxing. Powerful, predictable. Margaret blocked the first two and caught the hook on her forearm. The impact rattled her bones, but she'd felt worse. She countered with a knee to his thigh, deadlegging him, making him stagger. "First blood," she said. Reyes snarled and changed tactics. He stopped boxing and started fighting dirty. Grabs, throws, attempts to take her to the ground where his weight would give him the advantage. Margaret let him get close, closer than she should have. He grabbed her collar, tried to headbutt her, but she turned at the last second and his forehead glanced off her cheekbone instead of shattering her nose. Still hurt. Stars exploded in her vision. She used the pain, let it fuel her, drove her palm into his chin, snapping his head back, followed with an elbow to the temple, a knee to the solar plexus. Reyes doubled over, gasping. "Get up," Margaret said. He got up, slower now, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. Lucky shots. There's no such thing as luck, only preparation and opportunity. He charged. All rage, now no technique. The disciplined fighter was gone, replaced by a man who wanted to hurt her with his bare hands. Margaret let him come. At the last second she sidestepped, hooked her foot behind his ankle and pushed. He went down hard, face first into the concrete. Before he could recover, she was on his back, her arm around his throat, her legs wrapped around his torso. A rear naked choke. The most fundamental submission hold in hand-to-hand combat. Reyes struggled. He was strong, desperately strong. But Margaret had survived buds. She'd survived Hell Week. She'd survived 20 years of the hardest training any human being could endure. She held on. "Call them off," she said in his ear. "Tell your men to stand down." "Never," he gasped. She squeezed tighter. His face went red, then purple. His struggles weakened. "Call them off." "Go to hell. After you." His body went limp. Margaret held the choke for 3 more seconds, then released. Reyes slumped to the floor, unconscious, but alive. She stood up slowly, painfully, and turned to face the room. 12 cartel soldiers. All of them armed. All of them staring at her like they'd just watched a ghost defeat a demon. "Your boss made a deal," she said. "I won. The Marines go free." Nobody moved. "The deal was with him," one of the soldiers said. "Not with us." Margaret looked at him, really looked at him. "You want to die for a man who just got beaten by a 54-year-old grandmother?" The soldier hesitated. "Because that's what's going to happen. You all saw what I did in the swamp. You all heard your friends dying. And that was when I was trying to protect those men." She pointed at the Marines. "If they die, I'm not protecting anyone anymore. I'm just killing. And I promise you, I'm much better at killing than protecting." Silence. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of here. All of you. You're going to get in your boats and go back to Mexico and tell whoever sent you that the widow is still alive. And if anyone comes after me again, if anyone touches those Marines or their families, I'll come for you. All of you. And I won't be as nice as I was tonight." The soldiers looked at each other. "She's one woman," someone said. "She killed 7 of us." Someone else responded. "By herself." 8, a third voice corrected. Martinez never reported back. More silence. Then the first soldier lowered his weapon. Then another. Then another. One by one they filed out of the building. Margaret waited until the last one was gone, then collapsed to her knees. "Ma'am," Brixton's voice was hoarse. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "I'm fine." She forced herself back to her feet. "Just give me a second." She found a knife on the ground where Reyes had dropped it and cut the Marines free. Brixton immediately went to Donnelly, checking his pulse. "He's alive. Barely. Then we need to move, now, before they change their minds." "What about him?" Webb pointed at Reyes, still unconscious on the floor. Margaret looked at the man who had tried to destroy her, the man who had corrupted Stryker, the man who had sent 20 soldiers to kill 4 Marines just to get to her. "We take him with us. He's going to answer for what he did, legally. After everything he did, after everything he tried to do, you're just going to let him live. I'm not a murderer, Sergeant. I'm a soldier. There's a difference." She grabbed Reyes's arm and started dragging him toward the door. "Now help me. We've got a long way to go." They moved out into the night. Behind them, the cartel soldiers were already disappearing into the swamp. Running, fleeing. The widow had won, but they weren't safe yet. "The radio cache," Margaret said. "Did you find it?" "We never got the chance. They hit us before we could search." "Then we search now. Northeast corner of the building. Metal box. Should be buried about 2 feet down." Webb grabbed a piece of rusted equipment that could work as a shovel and started digging. Brixton stayed with Donnelly, monitoring his breathing. Cross stumbled over to Margaret. His face was pale, his wounded arm clutched against his chest. "Ma'am, what you did in there, that was necessary. It was incredible." He swallowed. "I've never seen anyone fight like that. The way you moved, the way you read him. It was like you knew what he was going to do before he did it. 32 years of training. You'd be surprised what you can learn in 32 years. "I failed," Cross said suddenly. His voice cracked. "Back in the swamp. When we were ambushed, I froze. I couldn't... You got hit. You kept moving. You made it here." "I froze." Margaret put her hand on his shoulder. "Every operator freezes the first time. Every single one. The difference between the ones who make it and the ones who don't isn't whether they freeze. It's what they do after." "What did you do?" "I froze for 3 seconds. Then I got up and did my job." She squeezed his shoulder. "You're still here, Cross. You're still fighting. That's what matters." "I found it." Webb's voice cut through the darkness. "The box. It's here." Margaret moved to help him pull the metal container out of the ground. It was rusted, corroded, but the seal was intact. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, was a satellite radio, military grade, designed to last forever. She powered it on. The display lit up. Battery at 60%. Signal strong. "This is Sierra Echo Alpha Lima," she said into the handset. "Priority Alpha. Authentication Nightshade 773. Do you copy? Static." Then a voice. "Nightshade. This is Overwatch. We copy. What is your status?" 4 Marines, 1 hostile prisoner. 1 critical casualty, snakebite plus exposure. Need immediate medical evacuation. Coordinates to follow. Copy that, Nightshade. Evac inbound. ETA 45 minutes. Can you hold? Margaret looked at her team. Brixton was keeping Donnelly alive through sheer force of will. Webb was already setting up a perimeter. Cross was wounded but standing. And Reyes was still unconscious, zip-tied with his own men's restraints. "We can hold." "Understood. Overwatch out." She set down the radio and allowed herself a single long breath. 45 minutes. They just had to survive 45 more minutes. Then it was over. "Ma'am," Brixton's voice was urgent. "Donnelly's crashing. His breathing's getting worse." Margaret was at his side in seconds. The young Marine's skin was gray, his lips blue, his chest was barely moving. "He's going into respiratory failure. The venom's affecting his diaphragm." "Can you do anything?" "Maybe. I need to keep his airway open. Keep him breathing manually if I have to." She positioned herself at Donnelly's head. "Webb, I need you on perimeter. Cross, you too. If anyone comes back, you shoot first and ask questions never. What about Reyes? If he wakes up, knock him out again." They moved into position. Margaret began the delicate work of keeping Donnelly alive, clearing his airway, monitoring his breathing, ready to perform mouth-to-mouth if his lungs gave out entirely. The minutes ticked by. 35. 30. 25. Donnelly stopped breathing. "No," Margaret said. "No, no, no." She tilted his head back, pinched his nose and breathed for him. 1 breath. 2. Check for pulse. Still there. Weak, but there. "Come on, Marine. Don't you die on me. Don't you dare die on me." Another breath. Another. His chest rose and fell, but only because she was forcing it. 20 minutes. "Ma'am, I hear engines." Margaret's head snapped up. Engines. In the swamp. That could be the evac. Or it could be the cartel coming back for revenge. How many? Oh, can't tell. Multiple. Hold your fire until we have positive ID. She went back to breathing for Donnelly. 15 minutes. 10. 5. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night. It's ours, Webb shouted. I can see the markings. It's a Navy bird. Margaret felt something crack inside her, something she'd been holding together through sheer force of will. Relief. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris. Medical personnel poured out, followed by armed soldiers in American uniforms. Over here, Margaret shouted. Critical casualty, respiratory failure. The medics took over, pushing her aside with professional efficiency. They intubated Donnelly, started IV lines, loaded him onto a stretcher. He's going to make it, one of them said. You kept him alive. That was damn good work. Margaret couldn't respond. She was on her knees, her hands shaking her body, finally accepting that it was allowed to collapse. Brixton was beside her. Ma'am, Margaret, it's over. It's over. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know. He helped her to her feet. And then she saw who was flying the helicopter. A young woman in a Navy flight suit, dark hair pulled back, familiar green eyes wide with shock and relief. Sarah. Her daughter had come. Sarah jumped down from the helicopter before the rotor stopped spinning. Mom! Margaret caught her daughter in an embrace that nearly knocked them both off their feet. She held on tight, feeling Sarah's heart pounding against her own, feeling the trembling in her daughter's shoulders. I'm okay, Margaret whispered. I'm okay. You're covered in blood. Most of it isn't mine. Sarah pulled back her eyes, scanning her mother's face. The bruises, the cuts, the exhaustion written in every line. When I got the call, when they said you were in trouble, her voice broke. I thought I was going to lose you too. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Mom, you're 54 years old. You can't keep doing this. Apparently I can. Margaret managed a weak smile. Though I might be sore tomorrow. A soldier approached, interrupting the reunion. Ma'am, we need to move. The prisoner is secured, and we've got transport waiting. Margaret nodded. Give me 1 minute. She turned back to Sarah. Her daughter. The best thing she and Michael had ever created. 28 years old, a Navy helicopter pilot following in her parents' footsteps. How did you know where to find us? Colonel Morrison called me. He said you'd activated an emergency beacon that hadn't been used since 1998. He figured if anyone could get to you fast, it was me. Sarah's jaw tightened. I broke about 15 regulations getting here. Your father would be proud. My father would have had a heart attack watching you do whatever you just did. Maybe, Margaret touched her daughter's face, but he would have done the same thing, and so would you. Sarah didn't deny it. She couldn't. We need to go, she said instead. Donnelly's stable, but he needs a hospital, and the others need medical attention too. What about Reyes? Federal agents are meeting us at the base. He's going to prison for a very long time. And Stryker? Sarah's expression darkened. Already in custody. Morrison moved on him the moment he lost contact with you. Found evidence of the gambling debts, the cartel payments, everything. He's finished. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment. Stryker, a Marine officer, a man who had sworn to protect his country, and instead had sold it out for money. Some betrayals never stopped hurting. Let's go home, she said. They loaded into the helicopter. Margaret sat beside Donnelly's stretcher, watching the medics work to keep him stable. Brixton sat across from her, his face a mask of exhaustion and something else. Something that looked like gratitude. Ma'am, he said as the helicopter lifted off. Gunny, I was wrong about you. You were. I judged you on sight. Assumed you couldn't do the job because of your age, because you're a woman. He shook his head. I've been in the Corps for 16 years. I thought I knew what an operator looked like. I was an idiot. You were human. Humans make assumptions. It's how we survive. That's generous. It's honest. Margaret met his eyes. You made a mistake. You recognized it. You learned from it. That's all anyone can ask. It almost got us killed. But it didn't. And now you know better. She paused. What are you going to do with that knowledge? Brixton was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to be better, train harder, listen more, judge less. Good. And I'm going to tell everyone I know what I saw out there, what you did, who you really are. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. His voice was firm. People need to know. The next time some young Marine sees a woman operator and thinks she can't cut it, I want him to remember the widow. I want him to remember what you did in that swamp. Margaret didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. The helicopter flew on through the darkness. They landed at Naval Air Station Jacksonville 45 minutes later. Medical teams were waiting on the tarmac along with a contingent of federal agents and military police. Donnelly was rushed to the trauma center. Cross and Webb were taken for treatment of their injuries. Brixton refused medical attention until he was sure his men were being cared for, and Reyes was handed over to the FBI. Margaret watched them lead him away. He was conscious now, his eyes burning with hatred as they found hers. "This isn't over, widow," he called out. "I have resources. I have connections. You think prison can hold me?" Margaret walked over to him. The agents tensed, but she held up a hand. "Let me say goodbye." She stood in front of Reyes, close enough to smell the fear beneath his bravado. "You're right," she said quietly. "You have resources. You have connections. Maybe you'll get out someday. Maybe you'll try again. Count on it. But here's what you need to understand." She leaned in closer. "I have resources too. I have connections. And I have something you'll never have." "What's that?" "Time." She smiled. "I'm retired Alejandro. I have nothing to do but wait. So if you ever get out, if you ever come for me again, I'll be ready. And next time I won't let you live." She turned and walked away before he could respond. The federal agents led him to a waiting vehicle. The doors closed. The engine started. He was gone. Margaret stood on the tarmac watching the taillights disappear into the night. It was over. Really over. "Mom," Sarah's voice came from behind her. "There's someone here to see you." Margaret turned. Colonel Frank Morrison was walking toward her, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Mags," he extended his hand. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too." "I can imagine." He shook her hand firmly. "You did good work out there, better than good. Those Marines are alive because of you." "They're alive because they're Marines. I just pointed them in the right direction." Morrison laughed. "Still can't take a compliment." "Still don't know how." He sobered. "Stryker is talking, cutting a deal. He's giving up everything about his relationship with the cartel. Names, dates, transactions. We're going to dismantle Reyes's entire network." "Good. But there's something else." Morrison hesitated. "Something I didn't tell you before." Margaret waited. Stryker wasn't just compromised by gambling debts. He was recruited, intentionally. The cartel knew about his vulnerabilities and exploited them. They've been planning this for years. "Planning what exactly?" "Getting to you." Morrison's face was grim. "You're not just a target, Mags. You're a symbol. The first woman to complete SEAL training. The operator they couldn't kill. The ghost who's become a legend." "I'm not a legend. I'm just a soldier." "You're both. And that's why Reyes wanted you dead so badly. It wasn't just about his brother. It was about proving that the legend could be destroyed, that the ghost could die like anyone else." Margaret absorbed this. "And when I survived, you proved him wrong. You proved everyone who ever doubted you wrong." Morrison put a hand on her shoulder. "You're going to be remembered, Mags, whether you want it or not. What you did in that swamp is going to be taught in training programs for decades. Generations of operators are going to study your tactics, your courage, your decision-making under pressure. I don't want to be a case study." "Too late," he smiled. "You're already a hero. Might as well get used to it." Before Margaret could respond, a commotion erupted near the medical center. Shouts, running footsteps, someone calling for help. Her blood went cold. She was running before she knew she'd started moving. Sarah was right beside her. Morrison followed. They burst through the doors to find chaos. Medical personnel rushing in every direction. Alarms blaring. Someone shouting, "Code Blue." "What's happening?" Margaret grabbed a passing nurse. "The Marine. The one with the snake bite. He went into cardiac arrest." "No, not after everything. Not when they were so close." Margaret pushed through the crowd toward the trauma bay. She could see them working on Donnelly, could see the defibrillator charging, could hear the flatline tone that meant his heart had stopped. "Clear!" Donnelly's body arched as the electricity hit him. The flatline continued. "Again clear!" Another jolt, another flatline. Margaret felt Sarah's hand grip hers, felt the desperate hope and the creeping despair. "Come on, Marine," she whispered. "Don't quit on me now." Clear. A third jolt, and then beep, beep, beep. The flatline became a rhythm, weak, thready, but real. "We've got him. We've got a pulse." The medical team sprang into action, stabilizing, medicating, doing everything they'd been trained to do. Margaret sagged against the wall. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "He's going to make it," a doctor said, approaching her. "It was close. Closer than I like. But the antivenin is finally working and his vitals are stabilizing. He's going to be okay. He's going to be in the hospital for a while. Recovery from cottonmouth envenomation plus the cardiac event means we're looking at weeks, maybe months of rehabilitation. But yes, he's going to be okay." Margaret nodded. She couldn't speak. The tears she'd been holding back all night finally broke free. She cried for Donnelly, for the Marines she'd saved, for Michael, who wasn't here to see what their family had become, for herself, for the young woman who'd walked into Bud's 32 years ago and somehow survived to become this. Sarah held her while she wept. The night wore on. By morning, the crisis had passed. Donnelly was stable and conscious, asking for water and apologizing for the trouble he'd caused. Cross was out of surgery, his arm saved by the quick work of Navy surgeons. Webb was already making jokes about writing a book, and Brixton was waiting outside Margaret's room when she finally emerged. "Gunny." She was exhausted, cleaned up, but still showing the bruises. "You should be resting." "So should you." He stood at attention. "Ma'am, I have something to say." "Go ahead." "When I joined the Marines, my father told me that the measure of a leader isn't how they perform when things go right. It's how they perform when everything goes wrong." He paused. "Everything went wrong out there. And you performed. You performed like no one I've ever seen. You saved our lives. All of us. And you did it after we treated you like dirt." "Brixton, let me finish." His voice was thick with emotion. "I've served under a lot of officers. Good ones, bad ones. Some who got people killed, and some who brought everyone home. You're the best I've ever seen. The best I'll ever see. And I want you to know that whatever happens from here, whatever they write about this mission in the reports and the after-action reviews, I'm going to make sure they know the truth. All of it. Every detail. The truth is complicated, Gunny. The truth is simple." He met her eyes. A 54-year-old woman walked into a swamp with 4 Marines who didn't respect her, and she brought all of them out alive. That's the truth. Everything else is just details. Margaret didn't know what to say. For the first time in a very long time, she was speechless. "Thank you," she finally managed. "Thank you, ma'am." He saluted. Crisp. Perfect. The salute of a Marine who meant every gesture. She returned it. He walked away. Margaret stood in the hallway watching him go, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Real pride. Not in herself, but in what she represented. In what she'd proven. In the doors she'd opened for every woman who would come after her. "Mom." Sarah was there holding 2 cups of coffee. "Let's go home," her daughter said. "In a minute." Margaret took the coffee. "I want to see them first. All of them. Make sure they're really okay. They're okay because of you. They're okay because they're warriors. All of them. even the ones who didn't know it yet. They walked together through the hospital, mother and daughter, 2 generations of service, past the rooms where wounded Marines were recovering, past the nurses and doctors who had fought their own battles that night, past the military police who were still processing the aftermath. Cross was first. The young sniper was awake, his arm in a sling, his face pale but determined. "Ma'am?" He tried to sit up. "Stay down, Marine. That's an order." "Ma'am, I wanted to say, that shot you called, the one I took on Reyes. I couldn't have done it without you. You talked me through it. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You made the shot cross, not me. The skill was always yours. I just helped you find it." "I'm going to apply for SEAL training," he blurted. "I know I probably won't make it, but I have to try. After seeing what you can do, I have to try." Margaret smiled. "Then try. Give it everything. And when it gets hard, remember what you survived in that swamp. Remember that you're stronger than you think." Webb was next. The smart-mouthed communications specialist was sitting up in bed typing something on a tablet. "Writing your memoirs already," he grinned. "Actually, I'm composing a letter to my mother, telling her I'm alive and that she shouldn't believe anything she sees on the news for the next few days." "Smart." "Ma'am, I owe you an apology too. When you walked into that briefing, I thought, I know what you thought. You thought what everyone thinks when they see a 54-year-old woman in tactical clothing. It's fine. It's not fine, but I'm going to make it fine." He set down the tablet. "I don't know if I'm going to stay in the military. After this, I'm not sure I have the stomach for it. But whatever I do, wherever I go, I'm going to remember what you taught me." "What did I teach you?" "That assumptions are dangerous. That competence is competence regardless of who possesses it. And that the most dangerous person in the room is usually the one everyone underestimates." Margaret nodded. "Good lessons. The best." She left him to his letter and moved to Donnelly's room. The Marine who'd started all of this, who'd been bitten by the cottonmouth who'd nearly died 3 times in one night. He was asleep. His vital signs were stable. His color was returning. Margaret stood at the foot of his bed and watched him breathe. 24 hours ago, he'd been a cocky young corporal who'd failed SEAL selection twice and resented everyone who'd succeeded. Now he was a man who'd stared death in the face and survived. A man who'd been saved by the woman he'd dismissed. People could change. That was the thing Margaret had learned in 32 years of service. People could always change. The door opened behind her. Brixton again. "He's going to be okay," she said without turning around. "I know. I just talked to the doctors." He came to stand beside her. "Ma'am, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said earlier." "What's that?" "My father, the Marine I mentioned, the one who taught me about leadership." He paused. "He served with your husband in Iraq. He was there when Michael died." Margaret felt her heart stop. "He told me the story once, about a senior chief who held off a whole insurgent platoon so his team could evacuate wounded, who fought until his ammunition was gone, then fought with his hands, then fought with whatever he could find." Brixton's voice was thick. "He said it was the bravest thing he'd ever seen. He said Michael Caldwell was the finest operator he'd ever known." Margaret couldn't speak. The tears were back, but she didn't try to hide them. "When my father found out I was assigned to this exercise, he told me to look out for Michael Caldwell's wife. He said she was a legend, a ghost, someone who'd done things that would never be declassified." Brixton shook his head. "I didn't believe him. I thought he was exaggerating, making up stories." "He wasn't." "No, he wasn't." Brixton turned to face her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, not just for how I treated you, but for doubting your husband's memory, for not recognizing what you are." "And what am I?" "You're a Caldwell, and apparently that means something." Margaret wiped her eyes. "It means everything." They stood in silence for a long moment watching Donnelly sleep, thinking about all the battles that had led to this moment. Then Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Mom, there's a call for you. Secure line." Margaret looked at Brixton. "Duty calls." "It always does." He saluted one final time. "It's been an honor, ma'am. A real honor." "Likewise, gunnery sergeant." She walked out to take the call, leaving behind 4 Marines who would never forget her. And somewhere in the distance, dawn was breaking. The longest night was finally over. The secure line connected to Washington. Margaret recognized the voice immediately. Admiral James Hartley, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. The man who had signed off on her missions for the last decade of her active service. The man who knew every classified operation she'd ever run. "Nightshade," he said. "Hell of a night." "Admiral?" "I've been reading the after-action reports. 8 confirmed kills, 20 hostiles neutralized or routed, 4 Marines saved, 1 high-value target captured." He paused. "All by a retired operator who was supposed to be observing." The situation evolved. "That's one way to put it." She could hear him smiling. "The other way is to say that you single-handedly dismantled a cartel assassination squad in the middle of a hurricane, in a swamp, while protecting wounded personnel. I had help. You had 4 Marines who didn't know what they were doing. That's not help, Mags. That's liability." His voice softened. "You did something extraordinary out there, the kind of thing that becomes legend." "I don't want to be a legend, Admiral. I just want to go home." "I know, and you will. But first I need to ask you something." Margaret waited. Stryker wasn't the only one compromised. We've been running a counterintelligence operation for 6 months. There are more moles, more leaks, more officers who've been turned by foreign interests. That's not my problem anymore. I'm retired. You are, but you're also the only person I trust completely. The only one with the skills and the experience and the absolute integrity that this situation requires. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to come back, not full-time, not operational, but as an advisor, someone who can help us identify the threats, someone who can train the next generation, someone who can... He paused. Someone who can be the standard. Margaret closed her eyes. She thought about Michael, about Sarah, about the life she'd built after leaving the teams, the quiet mornings, the peaceful evenings, the absence of violence. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." The line went quiet for a moment. "Mags, what you did out there, it matters. Not just for those Marines. For everyone who comes after. Every woman who wants to serve. Every operator who gets told they're too old or too female or too whatever. You proved them all wrong." "I wasn't trying to prove anything." "I know. That's why it matters." The call ended. Margaret stood in the hallway holding the phone, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, pressing down on her shoulders. Sarah found her there 5 minutes later. "Mom, what was that about?" "Nothing, just old friends checking in." "Old friends with secure lines. The best kind." Margaret managed to smile. "Let's get out of here. I need fresh air." They walked out of the hospital into the morning light. The sun was climbing, burning off the last of the night's darkness. Birds were singing. The world was going on, oblivious to the violence that had occurred just hours ago. That was the thing about violence. It seemed so important when it was happening. Life or death. Everything on the line. And then it was over, and the birds kept singing, and the sun kept rising, and the world kept spinning. "Mom." Sarah's voice was hesitant. "Can I ask you something? Anything. When you were out there, when you were fighting those men, when you walked into that mine unarmed..." She swallowed. "Were you scared?" Margaret considered the question. Really considered it. "No," she said finally. "I wasn't scared." "How is that possible? You could have died." "I've been close to death before, many times. At some point you stop being scared of it." She looked at her daughter. "I was scared for you. Scared that you'd lose me the way you lost your father. Scared that I'd break my promise to him." "What promise?" "The last thing he said to me. Before that final mission. He made me promise to always come home. No matter what. No matter how hard it got." Margaret's voice caught. "I've never broken that promise." Sarah's eyes were wet. Dad would be proud of you. So proud. He'd be proud of you too, following in our footsteps, serving your country, flying into danger to save people. I learned from the best. They stood in silence for a moment, mother and daughter bound by blood and service and loss and love. What now? Sarah asked. Now we wait. There'll be debriefings, investigations, reports. The government will want to understand exactly what happened and why. And after that, Margaret thought about the Admiral's offer, about coming back, about training the next generation, about being the standard. I don't know, she said honestly, but whatever it is, I'll face it the same way I've faced everything else. How's that? One step at a time. 3 weeks later, Margaret stood in a conference room at the Pentagon. The debriefings were over, the reports were filed, the investigations had concluded, and now she was facing a room full of admirals and generals and politicians who wanted to decide her future. Mrs. Caldwell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, spoke first, a 4-star general with a face like carved granite. Your actions in the Okefenokee have been reviewed at the highest levels. The consensus is unanimous. Margaret waited. You performed above and beyond any reasonable expectation. You saved 4 Marines. You neutralized a significant threat to national security. You exposed corruption within our own ranks. He paused. The president wants to give you a medal. With respect, General, I don't want a medal. The room went silent. You don't want a medal. I did my job. That's not something that needs to be rewarded. It's something that needs to be expected. The chairman studied her. Then what do you want? Margaret thought about it. Really thought about it. I want those Marines to get the recognition they deserve. They faced impossible odds and they survived. Brixton, Donnelly, Cross, Webb, they're the ones who should be standing here. They'll be recognized, I assure you. I want Stryker to face justice, real justice, not some quiet discharge and a slap on the wrist. He sold out his own men. He deserves to rot. He's facing court-martial. The charges include treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder. He'll never see freedom again. Good. Margaret straightened her spine. And I want one more thing. Name it. I want the Admiral's offer, the advisory position, training the next generation of operators, helping identify threats from within. She met the chairman's eyes. I'm not done serving. Not yet. The chairman smiled. It transformed his granite face into something almost human. I was hoping you'd say that. 1 year later, Margaret stood at the edge of the pool at Naval Special Warfare Center Coronado. In the water, a class of BUDS candidates was struggling through drown-proofing. Their hands and feet bound, their lungs burning. 2 of them were women. The first integrated class in SEAL history. The first time women had been allowed to compete on equal terms with men for the Trident. And Margaret was their advisor. Eyes up, she called. Breathe through the pain. Your lungs are lying to you. You have more than you think. One of the women, a young lieutenant named Torres, broke the surface, gasping. I can't do it. Margaret knelt at the pool's edge. You can. I did. 32 years ago in this same pool with these same exercises. I made it through, so can you. You're different. I'm 55 years old. I have arthritis in my left knee and a titanium plate in my shoulder. The only difference between us is time. She met the young woman's eyes. Now get back under. Prove them wrong. Torres took a breath. She went back under. 3 minutes later, she completed the exercise. Margaret smiled. The next generation was coming. After training, she walked to the memorial wall. The names of every SEAL killed in action carved into stone. Hundreds of names, hundreds of stories, hundreds of families who'd received that terrible knock on the door. Michael's name was there. 3rd column, 47th row. She touched it with her fingertips, as she did every day. They're doing well, she said quietly. Torres and Nakamura. They might actually make it. The first women to earn the Trident. Can you imagine? Silence. The wall didn't answer. I miss you. Every day. Every minute. But I think I finally understand why you love this life so much, why you kept going back." She traced the letters of his name. "It's not about the danger. It's about the people, the ones you serve with, the ones you save, the ones who come after." She stood there for a long moment communing with the ghost of her husband. Then she turned and walked back to the training center. There was work to do. 6 months later, Margaret received a phone call. "Nightshade, this is Overwatch." She recognized the voice, the same operator who had coordinated her extraction from the swamp. "Go ahead." "We have a situation. Honduras. American hostages. The local operators are good, but they need someone with experience. Someone who knows how to work in impossible conditions. I'm an advisor now, not an operator." "I know, but the hostages include 3 children, and the team on the ground is requesting you specifically." Margaret closed her eyes. She thought about retirement, about peace, about the quiet life she'd earned. Then she thought about 3 children in the hands of people who would kill them without hesitation. "Send me the briefing. Already in your inbox. I'll need a team, people I trust. We have suggestions, but there's one condition." "What's that?" "Brixton volunteered. He's been asking to work with you since the Okefenokee. Says he has unfinished business." Margaret smiled. "Tell him he's in." "Copy that. Transport leaves in 4 hours." The line went dead. Margaret looked at the phone in her hand, looked at the life she was about to leave behind again, looked at the danger she was about to walk into again. Then she started packing. Some people were meant for peace. Some people were meant for quiet evenings and slow mornings and the gentle passage of time. Margaret Caldwell was not one of those people. She was meant for this, for the impossible missions, for the desperate fights, for the moments when everything was on the line and the only thing that mattered was bringing everyone home. She was 55 years old. She was a widow. She was a mother. She was a grandmother in spirit, if not in blood, to every young operator she'd trained. And she was still the best damn SEAL who had ever lived. 3 days later, in a compound in the Honduran jungle, 3 children were carried to safety by a team led by a silver-haired woman who moved like smoke and struck like lightning. The hostage-takers never saw her coming. They never had a chance. When the helicopter lifted off, the children safe, the team intact. Brixton looked at Margaret with something approaching awe. "You know," he said, "when I first met you, I called you a grandmother. I remember. I was right about one thing." "What's that?" "You are a grandmother who happens to be the most dangerous person I've ever met." Margaret laughed. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment. It's meant as one." The helicopter flew toward the rising sun, carrying heroes home. And in the years that followed, the legend only grew. They called her the Widow, the Ghost, Nightshade. A dozen names in a dozen languages whispered in the dark places of the world where evil men planned evil things. She trained a generation of operators who changed the face of special warfare forever. She advised presidents and generals and kings. She saved lives that would never know they'd been saved, prevented disasters that would never be made public. And when she finally retired for real this time at the age of 63, she did so as the most decorated special operator in American history. A legend written in courage and sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that one person could make a difference. Her last day in uniform, she visited the memorial wall one final time. "I did it, Michael," she whispered. "I kept my promise. I always came home." She touched his name. Then she walked away. Not into the sunset. That would have been too poetic, too perfect. She walked into the training center, where the next class of candidates was just beginning their journey, where young men and women who wanted to be the best were about to learn what that really meant. She had one more lesson to teach. "Listen up," she said, her voice carrying across the crowded room. "My name is Margaret Caldwell. Some of you know who I am. Some of you don't. It doesn't matter." She looked at their faces, young, eager, terrified. "What matters is this. You are about to begin the hardest journey of your lives. Most of you won't make it. That's not a prediction. That's a statistical fact. The majority of people who start this program don't finish. She paused. But some of you will. Some of you will push through the pain, the exhaustion, the doubt. Some of you will find something inside yourselves that you didn't know was there. And when you do, when you earn that trident, you'll understand something that no one else can teach you. What's that, ma'am? One of the candidates, young, female, eyes burning with determination. Margaret smiled. That the only easy day was yesterday, and that's exactly how it should be. She turned and walked out. Behind her, the future was beginning. And somewhere, she knew Michael was watching, proud of what she'd become, proud of what she'd done, proud of the legacy they'd built together. The widow, the ghost, the legend. Margaret Caldwell, 55 years old when she saved 4 Marines in a swamp. 63 when she finally hung up her trident. Forever when her story became the standard by which all others were measured. She walked into the sunlight, her head high, her heart full, her duty complete. Not because she had to, because she was a SEAL. And SEALs never quit.